Welcome to another episode of Narratives in Black, where we deep dive into the stories of Black leaders and creatives making waves in Boston and beyond. Today, we have a very special guest who exemplifies the power of arts and culture in driving social change and economic development. Taneshia Nash Laird is the president and CEO of the Greater Roxbury Arts and Cultural Center, where she is spearheading the development of a vibrant cultural hub dedicated to showcasing Black and Latinx artists. With a rich career that includes revitalizing the historic Newark Symphony Hall, co-founding MIST Harlem, and serving in key economic development roles in New Jersey, Taneshia has been a beacon of leadership and advocacy. Her work extends into mentorship and board roles, promoting diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging across the arts. Her journey is a testament to resilience, vision, and a steadfast commitment to community empowerment through the arts. So get ready to be inspired, because you will be inspired as we welcome the incredible, the incomparable Taneshia Nash Laird to the show. Welcome, Taneshia.
Listen, that's it. I can just go now. That introduction?
No, we ain't done yet with you. How are you doing?
I am doing so great, and it's so amazing to see you, Amanda. I just love looking at your face.
I love looking at your face. You are an inspiration. Ever since you came to Boston, it's been like, boom. You have made a mark, and I cannot wait to see what your legacy looks like here and beyond. So thank you for being here. I was like, if we don't get Taneshia, I don't want to do it. With that being said, how was your commute today? Because it is a little trafficky today.
Yes, it was, but I'm here, right? And that's what matters.
Definitely present, and you look amazing.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. We're going to jump right into this conversation. I really want to start with your childhood. Can you share some insights about your childhood and how it influenced your career path?
You know, it's interesting because I can't think of a time where arts and culture wasn't part of my childhood. I'm a child of the 70s. My mom...
Where?
White Plains, New York. Shout out to White Plains.
But also where?
Oh.
70s.
Oh, yeah. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you.
It's giving 90s, baby.
Thank you. And so my mom had me in a program, I'll never forget, it's off of what is now Martin Luther King Boulevard. It was not called that at the time. And I'm sure these were like some former Black Panthers that had this, after school program where they taught us Swahili and West African dance and all the things. And so I just really am grateful. She's no longer with us, but I'm really grateful for her for that. She knew that I was very passionate about this. And there were other things that she did. For instance, I had a friend who wanted to audition for Dance Theater of Harlem, which again was a very young organization at the time. This would have been in 1981. And I went with my girlfriend to that, and I was admitted to the program, but she was not.
Oh.
But my mom didn't want me going to Harlem. So we did other things. But she encouraged me, and I think everything that I do today is because of my mom.
Well, first and foremost, condolences for your loss.
Thank you.
I know grief is not linear, so especially with moms. So I know that it's hard, but just know that she is proud of you and she is watching over you, and she is still very much here in essence. You know that.
Thank you for saying that. Well, I'm gonna tell you one thing is she didn't think this was a real job. Like, she didn't think this was a real career. So my first major, even though, again, in White Plains, by the time I got to high school, I was in something called the Westchester Arts Program, which was something that identified gifted performing artists and allowed us to go to the State University of New York Purchase College, which is the arts college.
Wow.
So I got to do that while also a high school student. But she didn't think it was real, so my initial major in college was accounting, if you can believe it or not.
Me too. Get out.
I think there's something to that.
There is, because of the numbers.
The numbers.
The
numbers. So I wish she could see the full trajectory. She saw some of it, but she's been gone for double-digit years now. But to see, like, Mommy, I told you this could be like, but she grew up in the Jim Crow South, so she came to New York with a one-way ticket to Scarsdale to be the help. And so I think really what she wanted was so much for me. Yeah. And this idea that I was going to be, singing and dancing for food, she did not want me to be a starving artist. So
I'm glad you named that because that is still very much the saying and the belief with parents and children who are in school for the arts. They do not, especially if you are of first generation.
For sure.
They do not want you to go into the arts because it still has that stigma around it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, listen, my grandparents were sharecroppers. And so this idea that I could do something that seems so inconceivable. She wanted me to have a good job, probably a good government job, a good government job, so I could have a pension and all of those things. But despite all of that, she's trepidation. She still put me in everything I ever wanted to be in. My mom, on a domestic salary, got me a flute. So I played flute from elementary school through high school. I was in every play. I was in every musical. I was all county chorus. And she took me to all of those things because she knew that that was important to me. So I'm very grateful for that.
So she was supportive, even though she was like, don't do this, but I'm going to still support you through the journey.
As a career.
I like that.
Yeah.
Harlem, but you also said from Jim Crow South. Where in the South?
So she is from Catawba, North Carolina. So this is total digression, but I recently started doing a little genealogy for our family reunion. So I knew we were sharecroppers, but I did not know that my grandparents were actually the sharecroppers for the mayor of Hickory, North Carolina.
Wow.
Right? And our family was owned by the brother, during enslavement, by the brother of the governor of North Carolina. So that's our lineage. But came to New York. My mother, on a domestic salary, helped my grandparents buy their house down in North Carolina. Right. So, she's hardworking, and she, wanted to make sure that I had all the things. So I wanted for nothing. And probably even when I went to college, my roommate did not think I was poor, although we were po, as they say, because of all the things that we had, plus the village, all the things that I had. So
wow.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense because you are hard working and dedicated as well. So again, like I said, she would be really, really proud.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is really, really proud. So we talked a little bit about values and lessons from your upbringing and what you carry into your professional life. But as a mother of two daughters,
Yes.
how do you instill the values of social justice, resilience, and entrepreneurship in them?
I think it's the kids are always watching, which is something I'll never forget. I had a toxic job that I was in. And I remember thinking it was me. I was the head of an arts organization, a predominantly white arts organization. And I remember sitting down with someone who's a big figure, big corporate figure, Black man who was the chair of a major arts organization, but also the CEO of a billion-dollar company. And I remember, rolling out all the things that I was going through, but I didn't tell him about the toxic part. And then I told him the toxic part, that this board chair had said something to me. He said, no, you have to correct that. And I said, what do you mean? He said, what if your children said somebody spoke to them like that? What would you say to your daughters? Oh, no, don't let them do that. He said, you have to conduct yourself as if your children are always watching you.
Oh, good advice.
And I know that's true because when my youngest was in maybe 3rd or 4th grade, so she was a little younger than that when this happened, her school was expanding. And she said, Mommy, they didn't do enough community engagement. Oh! She said, they didn't do enough community engagement. I was like, oh, okay. Then I got this new job at Newark Symphony Hall, historic place in a Black community. She said, well, did you do a business plan? So, and what's your strategic plan look like? So,
Not your daughter doing you.
This is the same daughter at the event that you hosted for us, that after the event, she said, Mommy, what's an invoice? Because she heard that I had to put together all the, I said, oh, and I told her what an invoice. She said, well, how do I make an invoice? So I told her, go to invoice-generator.com. Do you know that child sent me a $60 invoice for that?
No, she didn't.
She did.
For her time?
For her time.
I know that's right.
For checking in. And then she said, and she added a $7.50 injury fee because she got scratched while she was putting up the step and repeat. So clearly they are watching.
I love
They are watching.
that.
But both of my children are, I just think about the empathy and again, I grew up very poor, but I think they got a good life. They got a good life, right? I remember turning on, I think it's Claudine, that movie with Diane Carroll, and she
Oh,
is,
yes, yes.
and my eldest was like, "Oh, that's what grandmom was, right?" Because my mother died when she was 5 months. I said, "Yeah," and she said, "Oh, okay." So the understanding and to not judging, because there are people who judge people by their circumstances. My youngest daughter came home from school one day. This is back in New Jersey, telling me that one of her little classmates, a new classmate, black classmate, we lived in a predominantly white area, said she would talk black. I was like, she said, yeah. So I said to him, how would you like if someone said you talked his race? I said, oh, okay. So my kids, powerhouses, and I like to think that they see and they understand. So they are, my eldest daughter's a freshman at Hampton University, full ride, academic ride.
Let's
And
go.
her goal is to be a civil rights attorney. And my youngest, the one that sent me that $60 invoice, her goal is to be an aerospace engineer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Aerospace engineer?
Yes. So she wants to put us up.
Okay, I'm not mad at it.
Yeah.
Okay, she must have watched Hidden Figures.
Yes.
Okay.
And the place that is depicted in Hidden Figures is actually right down the street from Hampton's campus. So we went to visit it. I didn't realize it. We went to visit it when we dropped off her big sister. So
Wow,
yeah.
so much history.
Yeah.
How do you feel, this is not a question on the list, but how do you feel about being in the South versus the North?
So my dad moved back down he's from South Carolina.
That's where I'm from. Geechee born and
Yeah,
bred.
he right down there. He is low country, about 45 minutes outside of Georgia. I love the idea of being able to go back with agency, right? And go back and feeling ownership. My 91-year-old father tends his land. He grows sugarcane, okra, every green you could possibly think of.
Wow.
And I would love to do that, right? And I think it's keeping him young. But this is a man who left the South again to come up north to make money to send back down to his kids. And similar story in that he didn't do houses, he cleaned offices, right? So domestic work, but living in retirement very proudly. So,
but also caretaking, which is so connected to the arts if you think about it.
Yes.
Because when we're being domestic caregivers,
Yes.
we are essentially helping folks be in community and live their life as best as they possibly can to be able to give service and provide service for others.
Yes, for sure. Both of my parents also very much into the church, different churches, even though we lived in the same town. One Sunday I would go with my mom, another Sunday I would go with my dad.
Is that because they're two different types of churches?
It's two different types of church, and also by the time I could remember, my parents were no longer together. So my dad would take me on weekends, and he was growing greens and white plains in his backyard. But where I was going with this is my mom also in her later years became a caregiver to an older white woman. She was actually Jewish. My mother would bring her to her Pentecostal Holy Roller Church with her. And after she died, that family paid for a whole new music system for the church because they knew how important music was in our family and for praise for my mom. So I definitely think when you said that caregiver, it reminded me of Mrs. Warrendorf and her family and the support that they gave
beautiful.
us. I think it was beautiful, yeah.
You said the South. What a history you have in that blood.
Yes.
With that being said,
Yes.
you are an advocate for Black and Latinx artists.
Yes.
How do you integrate social justice into the work for these artists?
It's about allowing the artists to tell their truths. I grew up in predominantly white spaces, predominantly wealthy white spaces, and didn't always feel that I had the opportunity to tell my own truth, even creatively. So mostly it's about creating spaces for them to just be themselves and tell their truth, whatever that is. that's what I have been passionate about, not just in the role at the Greater Roxbury Arts and Cultural Center, but with my husband founding Mist Harlem. And this is the other sad story. My husband is no longer with us either. My husband died on the 6th anniversary of my mother's death. So same day, I said they were very, very thoughtful in that they departed on the same day. So I have one day a year for their death anyway that I mourn. But it was the same reason that we founded Mist. Harlem was changing very rapidly. And we wanted people to remember that that part of Harlem was Black and brown. So we founded it right between Central Harlem, Spanish Harlem, and it was a place where people could tell their truths. And it became a place before it closed permanently during the pandemic where people like Janelle Monáe would just hang out. In the very early days when Mr. Belafonte would just come hang out. And so what was interesting about that process of us developing it, it was on the cover of the New York Times art section, was the number of Black celebrities that embraced and would just come. And it just showed me that even people that we perceive of as famous feel like they need their own thing.
I just want to like resonate on that for like 1 second because wow. First of all, you just named some really heavy hitters. Like I love Janelle Monáe, but Harry Belafonte.
Oh yeah. So one of my biggest regrets is that Mr. Belafonte, my husband died very suddenly, so it wasn't like there was a prolonged illness. You know, I took him to the hospital on a Monday. He was diagnosed with diabetes. He wasn't overweight. He ran 5Ks, all the things. He turned 52 that next day. They said he would be out by Friday, and he was gone by that Thursday. So my biggest regret was Mr. Belafonte's right-hand person had reached out about connecting and meeting me, and I just was...
Well, again, my condolences for your loss.
Thank you.
And I hope that while we're having this conversation, you don't regret it because grief, again, is not linear. Regardless of what happens, we have to be present for the things that we needed to be present for. And it sounds like you needed to be present to be there for your husband, but also for yourself.
But mostly I was just my kids. I'm gonna tell you, I was taking them to school, going back to bed, getting up, getting them from school, going back. Like it was that kind of grief for years until I decided that this is what I wanted to do again. When we did Mist Harlem, it was kind of a crazy thing. Nobody thought that it could actually be successful, this idea of opening a commercial entertainment center in Harlem. But I'm gonna tell you, for the short period that he was alive, he died, by the way, only the first week of our official opening. But we had a full year of unofficial, like what they call soft opening programming. So we screened Ava DuVernay's first major feature. It was her second film, but the first one she really put out for awards contention. And I recently saw her in a Win with Black Women, which is a group that I've been a part of for 4 years. And she said, I was wondering if you remembered me. I know, right?
Like, girl.
Girl.
Yeah, I know you.
But yeah, she's literally the first picture on our Instagram when we screened that film for her in 2012. We did a screening of a documentary, Sweet Dreams, I guess that's the whole name, with her name at the time was Grace Hightower De Niro. She and her husband have now parted. That's Bob. So we did that. We had, how could I forget? Book signing with Dwayne Wade, his book, A Father First.
Wow.
And then after my husband passed, there were other people like Issa Rae used our place, like a lot of people. Pretty much every, I won't say ratchet, but every television show used our place, Love and Hip Hop, SWV show. So, and it was funny because I was grieving though. So I would see it and I'd be like, oh, okay. And then,
Yeah.
But to have that experience, and what I am grateful for is that when I first met him, I was just 21. And that we would talk about one day being able to do something like that. That was a dream. And so I am grateful that he had an opportunity to see his dream.
Come to fruition. But you're still building on that legacy.
Yes.
And he still lives within you because you're talking about him right now.
Oh, absolutely.
That missed Harlem, it just sounds so grandiose for that time of when you all were doing
2012. Oh yeah, this idea of, and Black folks, like we were like Black people opening something like this in Harlem. It was part of a trajectory. Our business partners were actually clients of mine. I did PR for commercial real estate in Harlem during that time. Funny story, because I recently reconnected. How I got into that is that I was helping a professional athlete do a real estate project in his hometown of Trenton, New Jersey. And then I became the head of economic development for the city of Trenton because I was helping Troy with his project there. So yeah, I'm kind of returning back to those roots, which I guess you'll ask me about a little bit.
I am, but ma'am, can we just talk about all the hats you just named?
Listen, I grew up in New York. We didn't talk about this, but listen, when I was 17, grew up in the suburbs, but I was on that train going and dancing at the Latin Quarter. So LL, like all those folks, I knew all of them during those early days of hip hop. And I'm super proud that it's coming down the end of this year, but I was in an advisory committee for the Grammy Museum's 50th anniversary of hip hop. So there's a lot that we're not going to get into this interview, but most of those things were part of what I consider my formative years.
And it makes so much sense now seeing the things that you're doing because you were literally at the forefront of hip hop even becoming what it is today.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. You know, I'm teaching at Berklee College of Music. So I say to my students, you know, Mama, your parents are supporting you here. I'm glad. My mother didn't think this was a real thing. But I'm teaching this at Berklee College of Music. I'm teaching a course called Entrepreneurship and Black Creative Expression. We started looking at gospel, and then we went into hip hop. And it's funny because I'm like, I know everybody in the documentary. And I'm texting them like, can you call into my students? But yeah, it's just amazing.
And Miss Gloria Hallelujah, Glorilla, just put out her album today with Kirk Franklin on the track, Gospel and Hip Hop.
Together?
Literally today it dropped.
Yes.
And I have been blasting it all morning.
Okay, I have not gotten to it yet, so
You
I didn't even know about it.
Listen, because I was just like, for a hip hop artist to say that their dream collaboration is with a gospel, just a legend.
For sure. Listen, Kirk Franklin, every year, I'm name dropping now, I'm a member of the Recording Academy. So I took my kids this year to, so another thing about my kids, I could talk about my kids like a whole show, but I sent my kids to a sleepaway camp.
They'd send you an invoice for that.
They'll probably send me an invoice. It is true whenever I talk to them about them. Anyway, sent them to a camp and they said every morning they placed Kirk Franklin and oh my God. Then we go to the Grammys and Kirk Franklin, they knew every word, they were singing and all that. See? So, and I know they know all the Glorillas. So
it comes full circle.
It comes full circle.
It ain't 7 p.m. on Friday, and it sure ain't 95 degrees, but we outside. Another question I wanted to ask you, because we're talking about long-term relationships, right? And it sounds like you still are very in close quarters with all of the folks that you have met from then to now. So let me flip that to your mentees. How are you able to maintain long relationships with some of your mentees? Can you share a story about how one of your mentees has grown and succeeded over the years?
Oh,
you have a good
God.
one, because you were telling me a little bit not
yeah,
too
like
long ago.
I don't know which one I told you, but I'm gonna try to pick a couple of them.
It's okay.
So, yeah.
Highlight them.
So a more recent mentee, but I'm going to give you a story about another long time one. A more recent mentee, I'm super proud because she's now a professor at Brown University
That's the one that we were talking about.
But I want to talk about Candace Frederick for a second. Candace Frederick was someone who said, this is before MIST. So MIST was 2012. So say this was maybe 2010. She was like, I just want to get on your calendar. You know, I just want to sit down. I was like, oh, help us out. You know, I was running an organization that owned two art. I had actually redeveloped a building to be an art gallery as well as artist lofts. And she volunteered with us. And then we had a full-time role. And I hired her for that full-time role. And just a couple weeks ago, I'm gonna get emotional. Just a couple weeks ago, I go on social media and I see that she spent a week speaking in Kenya.
Wow.
And so I've known her from trying to break into arts and culture, me giving her a role. I left that executive director job. She left after me. She unfortunately lost the role that she had after. I encouraged her to go back to school. I told her at that time, I don't know if it's still true, unemployment was helping people get postgraduate degrees. She got her MBA. I made sure I was there when she got her MBA. And all I ever said, I have another one. I don't necessarily want to name her. I'm super proud of her, but just because of some of the things I was told, she was another person that when I got her resume, it was almost, she was like a 3.8 GPA, super high GPA. I didn't know she came from a troubled family, right? But I hired her. I wanted her to be my assistant because she wanted to go back to get her master's degree. And then one day she came and she said, oh, my dad just came home. And so I knew what that meant, right? And I said, you got to spend some time with your dad. I said, how long was he away? 10 years, okay. And I supported her through that. And then I went to her and I said, hey, didn't we say you were going to quit after a year and you were going to go get your master's? And she said, oh, no, I have a professor who said all the schools that I'm applying to, if I get into them, it'll just be because I was Black. I was livid. I was so angry that I was near tears. And I called people. I said, it doesn't matter. Even if that's, first of all, it's not true because you have a resume. But secondly, they're not doing the work. You would be doing the work. I said, you're not going to be my assistant this time next year. Next year, you're going to do those applications. And so I remember Rolla and I were on vacation, a very rare one, in Jamaica. And I did that application for her.
Not you working on vacation, girl.
I know, it was crazy. And she got a full ride for her master's program. And today, she is at a major foundation responsible for giving out grants. At one point, she was over a Black Male Initiative. And so I think those are my success stories. I mean, people talk about Miss, but people like Candace, like my former assistant, like my former mentee who's now a professor over at, those I think are the biggest things that I can point to because these are Black women who were not given opportunities and that all they needed was someone to open the door for them. And that's what I'm passionate about.
I'm trying not to get emotional talking to you right now because you've just hit so many different things.
I'm gonna tell you one last one.
Please do.
So, Greater Roxbury Arts and Cultural Center, which is why I moved here. I will say that the architectural team for another aspect of the project, not for GRACC, said, hey, we saw this architectural team, subcontractors, and it's an all-white company, and we don't think that's right. So I give it to them that they thought that. These are not Black people of color. So I recommended someone. And the person that I recommended, afterwards, they all said, oh yeah, we know who that is. And they hired her. And I wasn't sure whether she could do the project because she was pursuing her doctorate at Harvard. And I went to her defense, by the way. Doctorate. This woman has a undergraduate degree from FAMU. Her master's, I think, is from RISD, Rhode Island School of Design, and now her doctorate. My point was, well, if y'all knew her, how come I had to bring her name up? But sometimes I think that's my role. My role is to be in the room to make sure the people who need and should get opportunities because they earn those opportunities. I just laid out that particular person's resume. I think that's my role.
I feel like it's your purpose. It's part of your purpose.
It's absolutely my purpose.
It's definitely a part of your purpose because you have a unique way of being able to, it's very similar to Kat Morris where,
I love Kat.
I love me some Kat. We could talk about Kat forever too.
Yes.
But I see the similarities within you both where you'll know where people are at and what they need. You're really keen on being able to say, I know what you need, come on over here. And you're not afraid to not only bust down the door, but to keep the door open. This word around Boston that goes around very, very frequently is gatekeepers.
No.
And y'all are the epitome of the opposite of what that means. When you see something that needs like solution-based. When you see a fit, you just come and pick it up and you place it right in there. And sometimes, like you said, well, if you knew her, why wouldn't you hire her directly? Why did it take that? Sometimes it's just your voice.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you
like a cosign, if you will.
Absolutely. I'll tell you the job that I'm not going to name because it was very toxic and I don't even want to give it air. But I remember at the time, it was the job that got me to meet Ntozake Shange because I brought her to the organization. So I have to credit it for that. So
that's one of my favorite poets.
Listen, Ntozake was on a panel, though, with one of my dear friends, Danny Simmons, and who's a visual artist and poet, and another woman who I feel so awful that I cannot remember her name because she was the one who said something. When I talked about getting that job that I'm not going to name, but it was a job that was pivotal for me for many different reasons, I went through 17 hours of interviews and met 22 people. And I remember a friend of mine said, who do they think they're interviewing? The head of the Metropolitan Museum of Art? Like, what is it? But I remember relating it to the woman that was on the panel with Ntozake and Danny, and she said they had to actually really see you. And that's when I realized sometimes they don't even see us. Even when they know us and they know the skills, they just don't see. And that's why they can know someone and not name them because they can't. So my purpose is to make sure, you asked earlier, is to make sure these people are seen, that they're seen and that they're heard and that they're truth. And let me tell you, that architect, she showed up, showed out. She did her thing on that project.
I know that's right. And also, I think that goes back to you as well. You even said, I wasn't sure if she was going to be able to do it because she was getting a master's and doing all this other stuff. But that's the impact that you leave on people, is that no matter what they got going on, they want to show up because they also know they're showing up for you too.
I mean, I hear that, so it's interesting because, like you said, I haven't been here very long, but I've established some partnerships, for instance, with some, as you know, majority organizations. And I remember the CEO once said, oh, we're all here for you. And I love that as a concept, but I also feel like I want people to show up for the people in the community. I'm a transplant. I love that. I love that they're helping me, but I want you to show up for the people that have been here. And so what does it take for you to see the people that are right in front of you? And so that's what I think. And honestly, this is not unique to Boston. Every place that I've worked, it's like, how do I make sure that they're seen? Because I know what it's like to be invisible.